This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio on the Overseas Radio Network, and I'm here with our new European correspondent, Michael Heaver from London, and we're chatting about how Europe's going to hell and trying to race to see if it can fall apart faster than the United States can. Well, we've been talking about the Greek debacle and the fall of the euro. I think now let's talk a little bit about Britain, Michael's home turf, as it were. Demands for the British people to have a say in their role in Europe got a huge boost. A new poll showed that more than 80% of the voters in the United Kingdom are crying out for a referendum. Nearly half of the voters, 49%, want their voices heard right now or straight away, as they say in Britain. A further third, 33%, believe that there should be a vote in the next few years. Now, I know that this is something close to your heart, Michael, because you've been campaigning on having a referendum on the EU. So let's talk about it.
Sure. Well, I mean, basically, number 10, the British government we've had this poll come out saying that people want a referendum. It's something they really want. And basically, the British government have taken their typical stance of just dismissing it with zero evidence, with zero polling evidence behind them, and just said, well, no, British people don't want it. And the reason that, of course, they're saying this is because I think that they know that if the people of Britain do get a say on EU membership as a whole, they will vote to leave. You know, the polls clearly show that. Actually, the amount of people that want Britain to leave the EU in the UK is growing and growing and growing. And really, the other side has no real argument. And so all the government done is sort of pathetically just dismissed this call, you know, and all of this data. And it's really quite pathetic. It shows how undemocratic and how out of touch the government in the UK is on this, connected to the people. And it's something really that's just... Yet again, I live in a country in the UK, unfortunately, which is ruled from abroad, and we don't get a say on it. I mean, in 1975, the British people got a vote on whether to join the European Economic Community, or whether to stay in it by that time, which was supposed to be, you know, a free trade area. Now we've got complete political union. We've got something, you know, a United States of Europe forming. We've got British taxpayers paying billions to countries that have gone bust because of the euro. You know, 1975 was a hell of a long time ago, David. I mean, I'm a pretty young guy. I wasn't born for, you know, more than 2 decades after that. I think it's time for me and many more of my citizens to be able to have a say on this matter. And frankly, for David Cameron and his cohorts to turn around and say, well, no one wants one, is really quite sickening.
Well, as I recall, didn't David Cameron give a cast iron guarantee that there'd be a referendum?
Oh, yes,
Wasn't
indeed.
That his words?
Indeed, a cast iron guarantee. And of course, like so many other British politicians, as soon as he took office, these type of little statements will quickly try to be brushed under the carpet. Oh, we didn't mean this. Oh, we didn't mean that. Of course, in reality, they just lied to the British public to get their votes, to get their support, because they know how Eurosceptic people are getting, not just in the UK, but right across Europe. The citizens have had enough. And unfortunately, yet again, I'll come back to it because it's a very important point to make. Aside from UKIP in the UK, there are very few parties that people can go out and vote for to really express their feeling. And so we're left to the political extremes, and unfortunately we're left in the doldrums with these parties that are fully committed and fully signed up to the European Union project, and unfortunately fully committed in many countries to the Euro project, which is failing so bad right now.
Well, this reminds me of a quote that I think Churchill said, but I may be wrong, that Europe never forgets anything, but Europe never learns anything. And it seems like that is happening again. Well, I mean, I see a radicalization of Europe, and I even see people talking to people saying, gee, we just need a strong leader and get rid of this democracy stuff. It doesn't work.
Well, it doesn't work because they have their own little ideas of how they want to run. And to be honest, David, I mean, a lot of politicians nowadays, in my opinion, are just in it for power's sake. They'll say anything, they'll promise anything, but as soon as they get in, it's all about what they want to do and how they want to do it, and it's not about the people anymore. And so, I think that's quite right to suggest that really democracy is, they think they own it, they think they own their voters, and they don't have to respond to what we feel, and really that builds up anger, resentment, and it does build rule out eventually positive political alternatives like UKIP in the UK and hopefully many more abroad. But the fact, I think, that so many people in this country want a referendum on the EU and want out of the EU, when you look at our media, our mainstream media in this country and right across Europe, and it's massively pro-EU. I mean, it's just loaded with people that talk about why the EU is self-evidently, this is their favourite quote, by the way, self-evidently beneficial to countries like the UK. And it's just complete and utter garbage, and people see through it. I'm very proud that people see through it, but we need to have our say. We need to have referendums. We need to get back to true democratic principles in the UK and right across Europe.
Well, yeah, well, you know, what happens, it seems like, you know, Britain had, as I recall, once upon a time, a civil war because of a king who thought he could rule without parliament. You now have a political class that think that they can rule without consent of the governed.
Well, I absolutely agree. And I mean, just if you look at historically where there have been referendums when it comes to the EU, you know, a couple of years ago, Ireland had a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty, the treaty that Cameron originally said the British could have a vote on. Ireland had that referendum. The Irish people rejected that treaty. And you know what happened? The EU said, sorry, you've got to vote again. And it loaded so much money into that country, and they actually tore up the media rule book in terms of equal coverage for both sides of the arguments, that the Irish voted a second time, and this time it went through. This is how these people operate. They've also, you know, the only countries that had a referendum on the Euro membership, whether or not to join the Euro, all of those countries rejected the Euro. You know, every single time the people actually get their say, whether it's in the UK or elsewhere, they reject. They reject the principles of the EU. It is not something that's popular. And, you know, we in the UK haven't really had that apart from 1975. If we had it again, I have absolutely no doubt that we would leave. And it's time for people to have their say. If you don't let them have their say, then, you know, the alternatives become very nasty indeed.
Well, because the problem, of course, is the same problem that the United States have, where you have Obama versus Romney, it's not a real choice. And the people want a choice instead of an echo. I've said that many times. And if you look, Switzerland and Norway don't seem to be doing too badly. They seem to be doing a hell of a lot better than a lot of the EU, and they've managed to stay out.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, the people are disgusted with Cameron. I mean, this is a party, you don't remember, who they go around saying, the Conservative Party and David Cameron, they say that they were Eurosceptic and that when they got into the office, they were going to sort of be Eurosceptic and oppose a lot of what the EU was doing. And they've basically been a cheerleader for it. I mean, a Conservative MEP in the European Parliament, he recently came over to UKIP, but when he was still a Conservative, he actually said that David Cameron was passing over powers faster than the Labour government that preceded them had been. You know, so when it comes down to things like that, it shows how powerful this EU project is. It shows you how dangerous it is, and it shows you that. Luckily in the UK it's not true, but with most mainstream politicians, they're all signed up. They've all got their hands in the till. They're all signed up to this EU project that basically rewards them for being loyal to it, because it is basically a revolving door of leave your office and go and work as a commission and go and work for this European Commission. And who's funding all of these jobs? Who's funding all of this cost? Who's funding the failure of the euro? It's ordinary taxpayers getting screwed once again, unfortunately.
So the EU is, you know, just one more of these. I see it. I've said that I always thought that the Germans and the French had been fighting for control of Europe for centuries, and they finally figured out the only way they could screw the rest of Europe was to get together on it. And so that's how the EU came into being. Probably you're too young to remember, but Margaret Thatcher, I believe, was right on the EU and the European. What wasn't the EU then? She proposed and was in favor only of a common market and a common currency, not a single currency. And I think she has been proved right as this disaster, this monster grows. And it must be particularly galling because European law is almost always based on continental law. European Union law is based on continental law, which is directly antithetical to the principles of common law, which the United States and we inherited from the United Kingdom. So it's an entirely alien legal system even that's being imposed.
Well, perhaps, but I mean, my argument really with the way things are going in Europe now, I mean, German people are becoming increasingly Eurosceptic of the EU project because they're the people that are having to put their hands in the pocket time and again to fund the failure of the euro in poorer countries that should never have been in the euro. I actually think that I actually think the divide across Europe now is turning into the politicians versus the people, the elites versus the man on the street who's paying his income tax and paying for the politician's mistake and deceit. I think that's the real divide. And I actually think when you look at videos like Nigel Farage on YouTube, you're seeing people right across Europe come together and say, enough is enough. The Euro project has failed. We want out of the EU. We want sovereign, independent nations.
Well, I think it's a danger that is really happening simultaneously on both sides of the Atlantic. Because as I've said many times, and you just said it in a different way than I did, we are seeing a resurgence of feudalism where there is a governing class and the rest of us are serfs. But now we have to break for a word from our sponsors. We'll be back in about 3.5 minutes, so don't go away. This is David Finzer with Michael Heaver for Truth and Lies Radio on the Overseas Radio Network. We'll be right back. This is David Finzer for Truth and Lies Radio and the Overseas Radio Network, and I'm joined with our brand new European correspondent, Michael Heaver from London. And we're going to talk now about a little bit about the UK Greens. You know, the Green Party, the Greens always seem to be so nice, and they like whales, and they like fish and forests, even though most of them have probably never seen them. But this is really interesting. They're having a leadership contest, I guess. Michael will explain more. But one of the favorites to replace Carolyn Lucas as the Green Party leader seems to be a Nazi sympathizer. Pippa Bartolotti, God, all these names are driving me crazy, was pictured raising the flag of the Syrian Socialist Nationalist Party, which is a fascist organization whose members give Hitler salutes, use a swastika or Hakenkreuz as their emblem, and base their party anthem on Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. Well, after all, Hitler was green and he was a vegetarian. So what about these Greens in the UK? Are they Greens or are they Reds?
Well, they're watermelons, actually, is how they're described here in the UK. You know, green on the outside, but you cut through and they're red as hell in the middle. That's basically what the Greens are here in the UK and Europe. And basically what they tend to argue for, and which I find this picture so disturbing, is that they want full state control over a lot of things. You know, more state spending. Government knows best, hand us your money, and we'll make all the arrangements and run your life and your country for you. And I tell you what, if anyone on the right in this country, you know, of a libertarian streak or anywhere had been posing with this type of flag, it'd be all over the mainstream media. But of course, it hasn't been picked up because it's the Greens, and aren't they sweet? Oh, they just want to protect the planet. Well, no, actually, some of them are incredibly nasty, and I have personal experience of that myself, actually.
Yeah, they really are. They hide behind this false front, and they're among the most dishonest, because at least the leaders of the so-called European project are really saying, if you look at it, what they want to do. They want a United States of Europe. They want to control everything. That's not a conspiracy. It's open. It's very open. We want to run your lives. But the Greens pretend, and so they really are hypocritical bastards. I mean, that's just...
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, these guys, I think, you know, a lot of them are former communists, former far-left socialists. A lot of what I think they believe in the green agenda is saying, well, the world's in danger. The only way we can solve it is by taking a whole heap of money off you people and ploughing it into the government and government initiatives. You know, we're seeing these bizarre wind farms that are just highly ineffective pop up all over the country. The Greens are jumping up and down, going giddy about it. At the end of the day, these guys are big government, extreme socialists / communists, and I mean, again, you see pictures of them posing with these type of extremist flags, and you've got to wonder. I mean, these really are some bizarre people. I think the Green movement right across Europe and the world actually is a bit of a cult, to be honest. It's a bit of a sort of let's get together and preach things, and anybody that disagrees, we just try and shut them down because they must be completely nuts. These people don't tend to be very open-minded. They don't tend to have very good substantiated arguments with facts and figures, and it is a bit of an extremist fringe cult, to be honest.
Well, it's amazing how illiberal they are. Anyway, we've only got about 8 minutes left, so let's talk about borrowing costs. They're rising across the continent as the World Bank sees global impact from the crisis. Borrowing costs for Italy and Spain have continued to surge, and I guess they're surging even higher than the report I have. And that's something I think you know more about than I, and they're even affecting currencies in Germany, Netherlands, Finland, etc. So what's going on with borrowing costs, and how's that going to affect the economy?
Well, it's always been obvious that you can talk about Greece and things, but Greece is small fry compared to Spain. Spain is the real big boy in Europe that's really going to worry people because it's such a big country, it's such a big economy. And today its government bonds have for the first time broken through 7%. That figure is extremely significant because it is basically the fatal, unsustainable number. It's the same as what Ireland and Portugal needed before they needed a huge bailout. And it's essentially showing that Madrid's borrowing costs are hitting new heights, essentially. They're now one notch above junk bond status. And, this is a huge country, a huge economy in Europe. If Spain's at danger, who knows where this is going to go? Because without Spain, without Greece, the euro cannot survive. I mean, it really cannot survive, essentially, outside of sort of maybe France and Germany.
Well, aren't they just printing money anyway to pay? These bailouts are all just paper money that they're printing anyway, right? Oh,
absolutely. And as people are saying that on the libertarian right, who actually understand economics and know what the hell's going on now, is we've got countries like Italy who are lending at a certain percentage but having to borrow the money to lend at a higher percentage. So to fund these bailouts, countries like Italy are actually getting themselves more indebted so that they'll need to be bailed out. This is something that Nigel Farage laid out in his speech yesterday on YouTube. It's absolutely incredible. It really is. These people, they defy economic logic, they ignore political will of ordinary people, and they push on with this project, and it's going to go bust. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and the longer that they artificially try and keep this whole charade up by printing money and bailing and so-called bailing out countries by basically putting their citizens into complete abject poverty, the worse it's going to be when it does all go wrong and the money and the printers finally go bust and they can't lend anymore.
Well, I as you know, I describe myself as a Christian libertarian, and I'm fond of saying that you can ignore God's moral laws, and he'll even that out in his good time, but you can't ignore God's natural laws, like the laws of gravity, the laws of friction, and the laws of economics. Mm-hmm. And these people want to ignore all of those laws. They seem to think that they can the state can become the new God.
Absolutely. And, at the end of the day, the markets tell the truth. The markets show us, what an absolute mess these people have made. And let's not forget, it's all right to band around all these hundreds of billions and everything, but I don't think people quite understand. The people in Greece right now, they're starving. They're giving up their kids because they can't feed them. You've got elderly people killing themselves because they can't afford to pay the debts because no one's got a job. I saw a report that in Athens, a quarter of the shops have shut down in the last sort of 6 months to a year. This is, the people in the EU, I don't think they get it. I don't think they understand. I don't think they go to these places and see what the hell's going on. The money that they're throwing around, it is destroying people's lives. It's destroying people's countries. And the euro is going to leave a legacy, I believe, of complete and utter economic destruction. It's not a matter of if, it's simply and sadly a matter of when.
Well, I have to disagree with one thing you said. Yeah. I think the people who run the European Union know exactly what's going on. I think that this is exactly what they intend, that they are, as the left always does, prescribes solving the ills of socialism by more socialism. As Ronald Reagan, God bless him, said, government is not the solution to the problem, government is the problem. These people know what they're doing, but this is not a conspiracy. This is an open plan to destroy the nation states, and the best way to destroy them is to make them ungovernable.
But the reason I would disagree with that, David, is because it's not just the left in Europe now. I mean, take Greece for an example. The main two parties, basically the main Socialist Party and the main right-wing Conservative Party in Greece, have essentially ganged up with the EU against the citizens and argued for the euro. So the main two parties of left and right are saying that this needs to be done, that this crock needs to be kept up and sustained. And so the only people that challenge it are essentially the communists that are there and the fascists that are there. And then you've got this big block in the middle of the left and the right who are essentially conspiring against their own people for their own personal gain to stay within the euro, to stay within this bizarre arrangement they've put together.
Sure, except I think the right, so much of the European right is not really right. I mean, there's all these arguments about what's right and left. I mean, Hitler was called right-wing, but it was the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which sounds pretty left-wing to me. I think the only real measure of left and right, the only logical measurement is that 0% of government is the extreme right, 100% of government is the extreme left. And so most of these governments that are so-called right-wing, we see this here in Serbia, for example, as well, they're really all socialists. They're just sort of right-wing socialists and left-wing socialists. There are very few real classical liberals or classical libertarians.
And that is massively dangerous, of course, because then what do people do at the ballot box? How do they express themselves? If everyone essentially stands on the same platform but with a few tweaks here and there, how does democracy function? If you don't have that option to leave the euro, if you don't have that sensible, classical, liberal, economic look on your ballot paper, then democracy fails because you do not have that option. And that's when, riots kick off. That's when real anger and violence can grow. And that's the real danger, I think.
Well, yeah, it shows as Europe is becoming less and less civilized. I mean, you see it in everything from mobs at football games to, just hatred growing within. The Europeans aren't becoming, people from all these countries aren't absorbing a European identity. You can't make Estonians and Spaniards into Europeans. They're Estonians and Spaniards.
No, absolutely not. And it's a very dangerous thing. These people running the EU, they say that they're against nationalism from individual states. I disagree. They are the biggest nationalists of all. They are the ones that are trying to foist this completely false EU nationalism that no one wants upon the citizens of Europe. And the citizens of Europe, we want them, of course, to resist this sort of through the ballot box. But what we don't want is ultimately to them to get pushed so far, for the Euro project to go so badly in places like Greece that it turns violent, that people take to the streets. This could happen. I hope it doesn't. I hope people vote in the ballot box and we get some sensible governments in Europe again.
Well, that would be good. Unfortunately, I think Thomas Jefferson is going to be proved right again. He says the tree of liberty must be periodically watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants. And unfortunately, that's happening in Europe. And that's about all the time we have for today. I thank you, Michael, for joining me, and I look forward to you being on again next Thursday and every Thursday so that we learn in the United States what's going on in Europe, and Europe hopefully learns from some of the good things that are still happening in the United States. And now we're down to what I always tell you. You have to expatriate your assets because you may have to expatriate yourself and you don't want to wander the world. This is David Finzer for Overseas Radio.